Great. Okay, so we'll now begin the next session, which is all about the ALTE Principles of Good Practice that was launched last year in April 2020. The document is freely available to download from the ALTE Resources webpage and also from the resources wall in this exhibition area, and you can also watch a video about it starring Waldemar Martyniuk, who is also on the stage now to your left. And I'm sorry, I'm a bit jolty at the moment, but hopefully you can hear me okay. So ALTE's Principles of Good Practice that was released last year is the third edition of a document that was first put together in 1994. The document is intended as a coherent set of guidelines that all ALTE members and associate members subscribe to when they are creating and running their language tests. And this panel on the use and impact of the ALTE Principles of Good Practice is organized to offer insights into ways in which the ALTE Principles of Good Practice contribute to the improvement and quality and enhancement of professionalism in member organizations. So we have representatives of ALTE member organizations as well as partner associations, and they'll contribute to the panel by offering brief critical reflections and comments on this document, the ALTE Principles of Good Practice. So Waldek, over to you.
Well, in fact, it was welcome everyone, welcome world. Good to see you. I hope you can see me and hear me. I'm very happy to start this panel by inviting Nick Saville to offer some remarks about the origin of this document, because I think it's important to know how it all started, how ALTE started looking at principles of good practice and developing a code of practice and further documents. So, Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Waldek, and hello again, everybody. 2020 was a milestone in the history of ALTE, as it marked 30 years of collaboration between the members, and our planned conference in Madrid last year would have celebrated that milestone. But from the start, back in 1990, ALTE's ambitions were to bring together organization of different types from across Europe to develop and set standards for language assessment, recognizing the wide diversity of language learning and assessment practices and the need to exchange know-how and good practice in order to achieve our shared goals. And the history of this multilingual enterprise is now told in our publication, The History of ALTE, the first 30 years. Graham already mentioned it this morning, so please download a copy of that if you're interested. But as a central part of this history was the development of ALTE's Principles of Good Practice and associated apparatus that goes with it. The first edition of the Principles document was actually the result of an ALTE project during the early days of the association that also produced ALTE's first code of practice, and that was in 1993-94. The first edition, that particular code of practice, which you can still get hold of, drew heavily on the code of fair testing practices that came out of the USA at the end of the 1980s. We were also influenced by the work of Lyle Bachman, and he was particularly influential in the adoption of the VRIP or VRIP features and his concept of usefulness in developing validation arguments. Later on, ALTE members contributed to ILTA's Code of Ethics, and that is now endorsed and incorporated into our approach since the year 2000. Our own development methodology for these documents and approaches was documented by me actually in 2010 in an article that I wrote in Cambridge Research Notes, issue 37, And that is available from the resources section of the ALTE website. And Graham perhaps can give you a link to that. In that paper, I describe how our approach moved from the general ethical and philosophical dimensions in the code of practice and in the kind of idea of code of ethics towards the more practical and action-oriented practices needed if you are going to take your principles and put them into practice. And this led eventually to the quality management system and the auditing approach that we're going to hear about today. So the current principles publication is in fact the third and latest edition. And over the 3 decades of working together, the membership of ALTE has grown significantly, and consequently a much wider community of practice has been able to take part in a consultation process that fed into the revision of these principles. Minor revisions were made to the original document during the 1980s, and a second edition remained on the books since 2001 when it was published. So this latest version, I call it version 3.0, has now been thoroughly reviewed, updated and extended as a result of quite a lengthy consultation and editing process with members and stakeholders across a very wide network of ALTE participants from about 2015 onwards. There are in fact 2 distinctive features I'd highlight of the ALTE principles of good practice. First, while drawing extensively from the literature, as I've already mentioned, in the wider field of assessment, these principles were designed specifically to serve the needs of the ALTE members in developing language assessments for their own stakeholders. This means that they were written to be accessible to a very wide audience with varying degrees of professional expertise and resources at their disposal. In this respect, the approach was intended to, should we say, to contribute to language assessment literacy and to help ALTE members and other participants to understand better assessment in their own contexts. And that's something we can talk about. Secondly, the principles are now fit into the ALTE quality management system as an integral reference document to be used in the setting and monitoring of the ALTE standards. And it's used alongside the quality checklists and other materials that form part of the procedures for auditing and lead to the awarding of the ALTE Q mark. So the latest revision project, although coordinated by a small working group that planned the collaborative activities and drafted the document, they were there to enable wide consultative activities to take place, both online and via workshops at meetings, so in a hybrid or blended way. The revised version is therefore, I would say, endorsed by or accepted by the membership of ALTE as a whole, and it's been agreed that in their form and in the way that things are expressed, they meet our current purposes and uses, and in a sense, therefore, specific to those contexts of language assessment. But inevitably, improvements can be made, and we look forward to getting feedback from a wider range of users, both in ALTE and from the field at large. So in a sense, this session will contribute to that. And in the spirit of continuous improvement, that feedback will be used to inform further revisions. So I would look forward to what I'd call version 3.1 quite soon, which is perhaps taking on board some of the stuff I've been talking about today with ethical concerns and data and AI and so forth. And perhaps, of course, there will be a 4th edition sometime in the future. And I would look forward to still being around to read that at some time. But with that, I would pass back to my old friend Waldek to take up the story.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. Yes, principles of good practice, a never-ending story, and I think even under current circumstances, we realize how important it is to react to the developments out there in the bigger world and adopt and adjust our way of thinking, even in terms of ethical considerations, but also in terms of new opportunities and new challenges that we are experiencing. My turn now will be to just review very briefly the content of this publication dated 2020 in a very short way, because you have it available both at the ALTE booth during this conference and also in the ALTE resources section on the ALTE website. To begin with, the structure of this document is also reflecting the philosophy that the ALTE Association has been implementing probably from the very beginning. We start with ethical considerations because we are aware of the fact all of those working in the assessment area know that this is probably the most sensitive area of language education. And there are lots of ethical considerations to be taken into account. So we start with those, including our own ALTE code of practice that Nick mentioned, developed in the 90s and then constantly worked upon and adjusted. Then we are outlining or inviting to discuss qualities in examinations that we consider important for all of us to make sure that what we are doing is useful. We are using the concept of the concept of usefulness in language examinations that then is illustrated by a number of examination qualities that we have agreed to follow and implement to the best possible extent in the given contexts. The third part of the document is about the ALTE quality management system, sort of showing ways to implement the principles in practice by ALTE members prominently, but also offering those procedures to all people interested in looking at how to make sure that what we are doing is a proper quality and is valid. And the final chapter, in my view, a very important one, is showing how we offer, what kind of support and assistance we offer to members of ALTE and already to offer to others as well, in order to improve, to base their work on quality, on resources that ALTE is offering, also using services that ALTE is ready to offer. So in brief, now the chapters one by one. We start with ethical considerations referring the users to the ILTA Code of Ethics, the International Language Testing Association's set of 9 fundamental ethical principles, very nicely annotated and worth considering. But we also refer the users to our ALTE Code of Practice that was already mentioned, when we address our remarks or our statements related to responsibilities in assessment practices to the 3 stakeholder groups, starting with examination developers, like institutions that are associated, but also addressing or formulating responsibilities with regard to examination takers and users in areas of examination development, of interpreting examination results, striving for fairness, and informing examination takers. In this, we also, in this chapter, in this section, we also refer to our work, to the work of our special interest group called LAMI, Language Assessment for Migration and Integration, because this is the area that is currently very much in talking, in discussions, requiring much attention. This group was set by ALTE in collaboration with the Council of Europe in 2002, in collaboration with the Language Policy Division then. And I'm happy to see in our audience Joe Shields, the chair of the Language Policy Division at that time. That was how it started. This cooperation is continuing and is resulting in a number of surveys, conferences, also in the production of a booklet on language tests for access, integration, and citizenship, an outline for policy makers. The concept of usefulness in language examination that we are presenting in the 2020 version is based upon a statement that is made at the very beginning of that chapter, that we have to make sure that an examination is useful, makes sense, is valid. It means it's worth, it's really doing its job. And it's, in very short, the usefulness is based upon a balance between a number of qualities listed here, such as content validity, construct-related validity, reliability, the evidence to be used when there is a criterion relationship, fairness overall, quality of service offered, practicality, and impact that was envisaged and that was hopefully positive in general. The way we then outline ideas and procedures, how to build a validity argument, how to make your argument that your examination is useful, is following the principles around these examination qualities outlined in the previous section, is about the how the ALTE quality management system works. To begin with, based upon the set of 17 ALTE minimum standards that are used to allow an inspection and auditing of examinations that members of ALTE are offering. But this is not the end of the story. We are also offering support and resources to be referred to when it comes to the implementation or implementation of the ALTE quality management system. There's a number of activities, conferences, seminars, but also services offered by the association, offered, for example, by the ALTE validation unit, but also language assessment courses and other resources that you find freely available in our section on the ALTE website. And to finish off my brief review of the content, just to repeat what Graham already mentioned, a longer presentation of the ALTE Principles of Good Practice 2020 you may find in form of a video on the ALTE website. And now I'm turning to the partners, to the contributors to this panel, and I'm very grateful for them to agree to contribute to this panel from the perspective of ALTE members and the use they make out of these principles outlined in this booklet. But also we have invited our partners from other associations to offer reflections and comments from the perspective of their activities. So we begin with ALTE members, Dina Vilcu from Babeş-Bolyai University in ClujNapoca from Romania, and Kateřina Vodičková from Charles University in Prague, Czech Republic, offering insights from the membership. Then we follow by remarks offered by Salomé Villa Larenas, representing LAALTA. I hope she has been able to connect from Chile, I think. And Peter Lenz, representing EALTA, whom I already saw on the list. So I assume we are complete. So now over to you, Dina.